Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name's James Copley. Today we're going to be previewing the game against Stoke City in the FA Cup. We did used to do this fairly regularly. My colleague Joe used to do it quite often, but he's since left us. He's gone on to be a teacher. So we've had trouble getting these started again. But we're starting with the excellent Pete Smith from Stoke Live. Pete, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I didn't realise Joe had got out of it into the real world.
Yeah, he still keeps his toe in. He still covers the odd Middlesbrough game every now and again. But yeah, he's a big miss. We'll move right into it, Pete. In terms of the game against Stoke City, third meeting between the two sides already this season, which seems crazy to say. Three different managers as well. Sunderland will have faced. What's it been like for you? I mean, it looks from the outside, looking in, like a bit of a roller coaster at the moment, covering Stoke City.
Yeah. Remember at the start of this run, before the first game, your manager was saying that he was going to become friends with the Stoke manager by the end of these three matches. He's faced three different ones. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I've written a line this morning which I thought kind of sums it up. There's been no stability, obviously, at Stoke for the last few years. And it's kind of circular. You can't have success without stability, and you can't have stability without enough success along the way. There's not been enough from many of the managers who've come and gone to give them more time than they've had. I don't think too many of them would really complain that they haven't been given enough time or the board hasn't been patient enough. Steven Schumacher is one of them. But from everything you hear about inside the club, I think the reaction inside the club was less surprised than the outside world to when he left. And the last couple of weeks have been, yeah, as you say, quite dramatic. Narcis Palac had only been there 3 months, but he'd overseen 19 games during those 3 months because it's the Championship, of course. And they were getting worse rather than getting better. And he was his answers were becoming more about the transfer window than what he could do to fix the problems that Stoke were having. So I think the writing was on the wall really for him. And Ryan Shawcross came in, club legend, and he got Stoke playing immediately better than they were playing previously. As you saw in the Sunderland game at home, where they could have lost it easily, but they were determined to go for the win as well. I've just seen the XG from that game, and Sunderland were very unlucky. But Stoke had to go, and that's what the fans were crying out for. Then they got a really creditable draw at Burnley, and Mark Robbins has come in. And we all know Mark Robbins, everyone who's been around the Championship beat, experienced manager, talks sense, seems like a really sensible appointment. We've said that previously at Stoke, but fingers crossed, they're due to get one right sooner or later. They're having enough goes at it.
Just philosophically, and I understand that this is like a really, really hard question to answer in a short way, but what has gone wrong at Stoke? Can you put your finger on it? Because just looking at some of your former managers, I mean, Alex Neil is somebody Sunderland fans know quite well. Michael O'Neill, Steven Schumacher, these aren't bad managers. What has gone wrong at Stoke? There's investment there from the Coates family. There's seemingly a half decent structure as well, and it just never seems to click.
Yeah, well, I mean, how long have you got, James? If I asked you why Sunderland haven't been in the Premier League for the past few years, then I'm sure you'd be here for the rest of the week.
Oh, God,
yeah, what it boils down to, I guess, same as Sunderland, is always recruitment and making sure that you've got players who are good enough to have a real shot at getting out of this wretched division. And Stoke have got it wrong more often than they should have done over the past 7 or 8 years. And unfortunately, you mentioned how the opportunity at Stoke with the billionaire backers who are prepared to support any manager. That also means that when they get it wrong, they've probably got more scope to get it really wrong. Say, if you look at the summer of 2018, they had Gary Rowett and they spent about £50 million on transfers. And I'm sure me and you just sitting watching the Championship every week, if you gave us £50 million to spend, we could have a really good go at building a squad to get out of the division. But Stoke got it spectacularly wrong. And because of financial fair play rules, the next 3-4 years, we're all just recovering from that bad summer and trying to build a better squad with less money. So there's always been that kind of challenge. And Alex Neil came in. As you say, he's got a decent track record. He'd done really well at Sunderland in that short time. But Stoke gave him a challenge that he hadn't really had anywhere else in his career, because he knew at the end of that first season that he was going to get the chance to completely rebuild, overhaul the squad, and he brought in 19 players, and he hasn't really. Well, no manager really does that. It's Championship manager kind of stuff, and it was a whole new scenario for him. And I think it'd be really interesting to look back, talking to him now, at what he got wrong, what he could have done differently, because Stoke brought in 19 players and ended up no further along than they were previously. So yeah, it's a different challenge for every manager. But Mark Robbins hopefully is someone who's been around the block, seen it all, and can take on anything that's thrown at him. In fact, sorry, just to wrap up this question, I said to him at the press conference last week when he joined that Stoke has been described as an impossible job. But looking at what he had taken on at Coventry, being kicked out of their stadium, their ownership problems, and everything that they faced, he hauled them from League Two to the cusp of the Premier League. So he must laugh when people call Stoke an impossible job. It's not. They just need the right man to be able to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move on to Mark Robbins in a second in his first game against Plymouth Argyle. But from sort of a professional, personal standpoint, how did you find Alex Neil? Because he definitely blotted his copybook by the way that he left Sunderland, but sitting in on some of his press conferences, like a really engaging, sort of fiery, prickly character. What was it like for you?
Oh, that's what I was expecting, but completely different to what I got. He was really charming and friendly. There was only it's a small beat at Stoke. And there's myself and Radio Stoke and a couple of other people, and he got to know us really well. He was always friendly with us. Always stayed to chat about football. Loved talking about football. And yeah, you could see that he was desperate to be the man who solved it at Stoke, and he threw everything at it. I remember talking to him about 6 months in, and he said he'd done more at Stoke in those 6 months than he'd done in 4.5 years at Preston. He was that busy, and it was a real shame that it didn't work because he suddenly gave it everything. And right until the final week, he was really convinced that it was going to work. And every time I could throw him a difficult question, and afterwards he'd just say, "Calm down, Pete. It's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine." And then in the last week before he was sacked, you could just tell that the switch had been flicked, and he suddenly realised that he was on his way out, and he seemed really heartbroken by it. I'm sure he'll get a lot of sympathy from Sunderland fans about that.
No, I really liked Alex Neil in terms of what he did for the club. Yes, the way he left did leave a sour taste, but he got us promoted out of League One, which is a godforsaken place, to be brutally honest with you. So I'll always be grateful.
You got to get out of there, haven't you?
Yeah, I know. I'll always be sort of grateful for him about that. So just in terms of this game on Saturday, then it sort of takes on added importance, doesn't it, for Mark Robbins? He's had his first game against Plymouth Argyle, which was a draw in the Championship. You know, you want to get off to the best possible start. Managers want to get momentum going. What are we expecting from this game?
Well, and he got Coventry to the semi-final last year as well, so he knows how much fun you can have in this competition, that's for sure. And I think it's really close in the bottom half of the Championship. You won't have looked under the mid-table for a while, but it's really close.
I did have a look this morning to see where you were.
But then there's a buffer between the 13th, I think it's Millwall and 13th, and there's a buffer to 12th. If Stoke can stay up, then the season's dead. They've got to stay up first, and that's obviously really important. But if they can do enough to just keep away from the danger zone, then a good cup run would go a long way to keeping the season alive in a good way, in a positive way. It's a really tough game for Stoke. We know it. But yeah, you're right. I think there's more riding on it because there's a new manager, and he'd love to bring a bit of positive momentum with him. It's a chance, I'm sure, for players as well to prove themselves to him. It's a clean slate for everybody, isn't it? And if they can go and put on a performance at Sunderland, then they can make themselves a steady pick for Mark Robbins.
It's interesting from the Sunderland perspective because we're 3 points off top now. We've got that little buffer to 7th place, which I think is 11 points. Regis Labree's used sort of 11, 12, 13 players pretty consistently. We've picked up a lot of injuries, especially over the Christmas period. I think he's probably likely to pretty heavily rest and rotate players. I don't think you're going to see the likes of Joe Bellingham or Wilson Isidore, Patrick Roberts. I think they'll all drop out. There'll be an opportunity for some fringe players. I think some young players as well. Maybe Naz Rusin, maybe a debut for Trey Ogunsui, who's very highly rated. But in terms of Stoke City's lineup, do you think Mark Robins will go strong with that in mind, what you've just said?
Yeah, I mean, we're not in a position to be able to second guess him too much at this stage. It'll be interesting. But Stoke have barely used many players over the Christmas period. I think they've kept the same starting 11 for 2-3 games, and just only made one change on Saturday against Plymouth. So there's a chance maybe he might change a couple of things, but I'd imagine that he'd go reasonably strong. There's a couple of players who would fancy coming in to prove themselves, players who are closer to the team than others. But I should imagine it will be pretty close to what we've seen in recent weeks.
And obviously very early days, but what were your thoughts on Mark Robins' style of play against Plymouth? How did that game go down? Were the green shoots of encouragement, anything sort of new or different to the previous regime?
Well, Plymouth was a very different game to the Sunderland game. The Sunderland game was so open, wasn't it? It was really end to end. Whereas Plymouth came and they had they played a 5-4-1, but it was pretty much a 10-0-0, and Stoke couldn't break them down. I think Stoke's strength is their ability in transition in the pace they can break at, and there was no space behind Plymouth to attack. I don't expect Sunderland will sit back on Saturday, so it should be quite an entertaining game. Hopefully, Stoke will go for it. It's going to be all sold on the day, isn't it? So there's no point hanging on for anything. It should be an interesting game and very different to the one we saw last weekend.
Absolutely. And what did you make, sort of, just to throw it back a little bit, what did you make of that last game? Obviously, Sunderland, Stoke at the Bet365 Stadium. I actually thought Sunderland were probably worthy of a point. Perhaps should have nicked it as well, obviously, with a late goal coming. But from a Stoke point of view, I actually thought that there was some really, really positive stuff on display. And I actually thought it was a team that were compact at times. They were clearly working for Ryan Shawcross at the time. At the time, they were clearly working for themselves. I thought the fans were excellent and getting behind them. And I actually came away from the game thinking there's a little bit of a platform here for whoever comes in and can get it right.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be interesting to see if Stoke can solve it in different games against teams who don't come at them. How they can beat the kind of side they faced in Plymouth on Saturday. But you're right. I think they've got a group in there that will work for the manager. There's no bad eggs. It doesn't seem like, and it's really young. They've got some skillful players. The last manager, Narcis Palac, made the point that Stoke and Sunderland have got quite a similar average age, but it seems like when you've got a young team that the highs are higher and the lows are lower. And in the last couple of months, Stoke have got in a bit of a rut, and these young players haven't been able to find their way out of it. So it would be interesting if Sunderland had the same kind of scenario. They got on a bad run, how these young players would be able to turn it around. But likewise,
well, we had that last year. We had that last year very heavily.
Exactly. Yeah, it can run away with you, can't it? Suddenly,
it can.
If Stoke get a bit of momentum and they remember how to win games, then who knows? This division isn't great shakes at times, and there's certainly enough teams to be able to pick points up against. So yeah, there is a platform for Mark Robins to work on. He's got an important couple of bits of transfer business, I think, this month, just to make sure that they've got enough in the changing room, not to keep looking over their shoulder. But if you have the right players around them, we've got players like Bajan Ho and Tom Cannon, who can raise their game with the right teammates, I think.
I was just about to ask about Tom Cannon, actually, because Sunderland had placed a couple of bids for him in the summer. He ended up joining Stoke City on loan from Leicester City. I'm always impressed when I watch him. I thought he was good at the Bet365. Obviously, he got the winner as well. I thought he was a threat. How important has he been? Because he seems to guarantee goals at this level, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he would probably say that he should have got more. What I've liked over him in recent weeks, is that he's been really aggressive, and he makes sure that centre backs know that they're in a game. That's something new. I think when he came to Stoke, he'd barely played for a year. He'd had a couple of games at Leicester, but he'd had a bit of time out injured with a back problem, and a bit of time on their bench. So it took him a little bit of time to get up to speed, and he's still not quite the Tom Cannon I think that we can expect. But I think there's a real player in there. And if you look at players who've gone out on loan from the Premier League to anywhere this season, there aren't many who've scored goals regularly. Louis Barry from Villa to Stockport, who's been recalled, and Cannon, who's on double figures in League and Cup. And over the last 15 years, Stoke have really struggled to have a striker who scores regularly, whether it's been on loan or permanently or coming through the system. And to break that cycle has been really important. We know Leicester can recall him this month, but there was a lot of competition for him in the summer, and he chose to come to Stoke. I think it suits him geographically, and he's playing every week. I think he's getting better. So I'd be surprised if he was recalled to be sent anywhere else on loan. If Leicester had a big bid, then you never know. But they had 10, 12 million pounds on the table in August, and he ended up coming out on loan anyway. So at the moment, I'd say it was unlikely. I'd expect him to stay at Stoke for the next few months, and certainly that's what Mark Robbins will be hoping to.
Do you think that price tag probably makes it unlikely that he would sign for Stoke in the summer, or is that something that, if it goes well under Mark Robbins, could be done?
Well, I mean, Stoke can't afford to spend £10 million. It can't afford to spend £5 million on any player at the moment because of financial fair play. But the financial fair play rules are going to change. So how quickly that happens will dictate everything, I guess. At the moment, I can't really imagine a promoted team taking a punt on Cannon. A parachute team, maybe Sheffield United. But there's a small pool of clubs, I think, who are in a position to both be able to afford him and want him, and would be able to offer the game time that he wants.
Absolutely. How's Lyndon Gooch been getting on at the club recently? Former Sunderland. He's only got about 6 months left on his deal, I think. Yeah. What's the feeling around his future? I know he played against Sunderland. I think he was a late replacement at left back, wasn't he? Which sums Gucci up because he'll play anywhere. It's almost like, that old boxing adage, have gloves, will travel. That's Lyndon Gooch, isn't it? I've got some boots. I'll play anywhere.
Absolutely. Well, you know what he's like as a character. He had a bit of a challenging game, I would say, against Sunderland. He had some difficult moments, but then Stoke went to Burnley and he had a blinder. Yeah, he played really, really well. He got forward. He was putting in crosses with his left foot, and he kept another clean sheet. They kept another clean sheet last weekend, and Plymouth didn't trouble Stoke at all defensively. Stoke have got a bit of injury trouble at left back. Eric Bocat is out for a few weeks. Ender Stevens hasn't started, I think, since November. He's been back on the bench, but Gooch has got this chance to lay down a marker. And as you say, he'll play anywhere he's needed. He hasn't really been able to hold down a regular starting spot in one position for Stoke, partly due to injuries since he joined from Sunderland. And who knows what's going to happen in the summer. I'm sure he'll have plenty of offers on the table because of his versatility and his character.
One more I wanted to ask you about. Dean Whitehead, I know he's been on Stoke City's coaching staff for a long time. Former Sunderland captain, actually, I think won maybe 2 promotions with Sunderland. I'll have to double check that. But what's the situation with him? Is he set to stay under Mark Robbins?
No, he's left. He actually only came in September. He played for Stoke. Obviously, he joined Stoke from Sunderland, and came with Narcis Palic in September. He hadn't actually worked with him previously, but they'd both worked at Huddersfield and knew each other from there. Mm-hmm. And he was part of his coaching team. He stayed under Shawcross, so he was still on the bench against Sunderland.
I noticed that, yeah.
But then he left Stoke. Mark Robbins has brought in 2 coaches. He brought in James Rowberry, who was the Newport manager, and he's the Wales assistant manager. And he's brought in Paul Nevin, who's the England under-20s manager. So a couple of really highly respected coaches. And everybody you speak to says, I think they're really good coaches. Mark Robbins at Coventry there's a lot of pieces written about his relationship with AD Vivash, who's his assistant, and took a lot of credit for their success. They fell out for whatever reason last year. They went different ways in the summer. So Mark Robins has spent his time out of the game putting together a new backroom team ready for this opportunity. So at the moment, on paper, it sounds really promising. I guess we'll soon find out how it goes.
Absolutely. And finally, what's your gut feeling for the game on Saturday? For me, I'm probably leaning towards a Stoke City win. I think it's just got that feel. I genuinely just think it's got that feel about it in terms of Mark Robins needing a result, needing to get the ship turned, and I think Sunderland will just rest a couple of players. I think it'll be competitive, and I'd like to think there'll be some decent performances from Sunderland. But I think it's going to be such a heavily rotated side that it's always very difficult. I look back when Sunderland played in the Carabao Cup against Preston North End away right at the beginning of the season, and that was the sort of the second 11. And it's just really hard to get any sort of continuity. Those relationships around the pitch haven't developed. I'm sort of expecting something similar against Stoke on Saturday.
I think whenever the Stoke and Sunderland have played in the FA Cup before, it's gone to a replay, but it goes straight to extra time and penalties, I think, this time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So hopefully that lends itself to a good game. I think it'll be open, and I think it'll be difficult to predict. I think both sides can probably win it and lose it, and hopefully, from my point of view, Stoke can find a goal or two to sneak it. But I wouldn't have followed Stoke for 35 years without predicting a Sunderland win.
hopefully as well for our sake in terms of finishing work, it doesn't go to extra time and penalties, and you can get yourself back out of Stoke nice and quickly either way.
Yeah, I'll take that. But I think we've had such a conveyor belt of managers over the last few years, and they've all been good with us. All been really nice people to work with. But I said before Robins was appointed, I'd take someone really nasty now, and someone who hated me and was really
somebody who wins.
I've had enough of covering the team that loses as much as Stoke have done over the last few years. So, yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, fingers crossed it's a good game regardless.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, Pete. Where can we find you and your work if people want to read more about Stoke ahead of the game on Saturday? Sorry.
Yeah, if you're passing through Stoke-on-Trent, pick up a newspaper. That'd help us. And we're online as well, Stoke-on-Trent Live. So yeah, plenty of stories on there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete, for joining us. Thanks everybody for listening. You can keep up to date with all of our coverage ahead of the game against Stoke City on Saturday in the FA Cup on the Sunderland Echo website. Thanks very much for listening.